The horse came out of the cottonwoods with a deadweight man hanging from the saddle by one hand, his boot striking the mare's flank every few steps. Blood had dried black down her shoulder. Fresh drops still fell from the rider, darkening the white dust by the river. Leah heard the animal before she saw it. Widower, if talk in town was true. Before we go farther into this hard country, settle in wherever night has found you and tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Folks who love stories like this ought to know they are keeping company. Then come back to the river, because Leah had only a breath to decide whether a stranger lived or died. The bullet had gone in below Eli's ribs and passed through. That spared him one kind of death and invited 3 others, bleeding, fever, or whatever men were coming back to make certain of. Leah tore open his shirt, cleaned the wound as best she could with river water and cloth, and found an oilskin packet tucked inside his vest. Tax notices, copies of county filings, a folded letter in a woman's cramped hand. Do not trust Silas Creed, no matter what he offers. Leah heard distant hoofbeats and did not think again. She got Eli half across the saddle, tied his wrist to the horn so he would not slide off, and led the mare up a dry wash hidden by willow and redstone. Twice he nearly fell on her. Once he opened his eyes and whispered, "Didn't make it home." "Not yet," she said. By dark she had him inside an abandoned sheep camp tucked under a red bluff, where even moonlight struggled to enter. She built a small fire, boiled water, packed the wound, and forced bitter willow bark between his teeth when he could swallow. When he could not, she waited and tried again. Near midnight her Uncle Thomas' gray horse ducked through the doorway, bringing cold air and a face already set against trouble. He took in the stranger, the blood, and Leah's hands working the bandage. "Tell me you found him dead," he said, and got foolish after. "He isn't dead. That is the trouble." Thomas had buried too much since the Red River War to waste fear on small things. If he feared this, it was because it deserved fearing. Leah showed him the letter. When he read the name Silas Creed, his mouth went hard. Creed leased grass from half the country and owned enough debt to make other men mistake his greed for law. He wanted water, land, and the kind of obedience that made decent people apologize for standing in their way. "Put him back on the horse before dawn," Thomas said. "If Creed wants him dead, mercy will not stop Creed. If white men find him here, they will say we finished what others began." Leah looked at Eli's fever-climbing face and thought of the little girl she had once carried to an agency doctor who never bothered to look up before saying, "Come back tomorrow." Her daughter had been buried before sunrise. "No," Leah said. Thomas studied her for a long moment. "Then his life joins itself to yours. Whatever follows him comes here first." Outside, coyotes cried in the distance. Inside that small stone room, Leah's life bent in a new direction and did not ask permission. By morning the fever had him hard. He fought once, trying to rise against the blankets, then fell back. He muttered names she did not know and one she did not need explained. Anna. The way he said it told Leah the woman was dead. 3 days passed in broth, bitter tea, fresh bandages, and the rough work of holding a man to the living world when part of him had already gone wandering after the dead. On the 4th day he woke clear-headed, reached for a gun that was not there, and winced when pain caught him. He took in the stone walls, the cedar smoke, the shelves of roots and wrapped bundles, and Leah sewing his torn shirt by the fire. How long? Long enough to be alive instead of buried. His gray eyes moved to the bandage at his side. "You saved me." "Looks that way." "Why?" Leah set the shirt down. "Because you were dying in front of me, and I am tired of that being enough reason for the world to do nothing." He let the answer rest. Men near death often receive truth more gently than the healthy. After a moment he asked about the mare, and Leah said, "Fed, watered, and better mannered than most men." The corner of his mouth moved. Then memory came back in full. "Silas Creed," he said. He told her the rest in pieces. Creed had been pushing widows and small ranchers off spring land with false taxes and forged arrears. Eli had noticed figures in the county books that did not match the notices being served. He rode to meet Creed with copies in his vest and got a bullet for it before he finished getting off his horse. Leah handed him the oilskin packet. He checked it like a man feeling for his own pulse. When he found the letter, his jaw tightened. Mrs. Holloway wrote this. Her husband died in January. Creed wants her water and mine, and the parcels between. If these papers hold, He loses land, money, half the county board, maybe the bank besides. Then he will come for them, Leah said. And for the woman who kept you breathing. That truth entered the room and stayed there. Thomas returned at noon with rabbits and uglier news. Creed's rider had already reached Cache Creek, saying Eli Mercer had been taken by raiding Indians near the river. Men were stirring. Some wanted a search. Others wanted someone to blame before a body appeared. He is setting the story before the truth can stand up, Thomas said. Eli swung his legs off the cot and nearly collapsed. Leah caught him, pushed him back down, and felt the weakness he had been hiding. Shame darkened his face more than pain. This is on me, he said. If I stay, I endanger you. If I ride, maybe I can draw Creed away. You can hardly stand, Leah said. Then tie me to the mare and point me south. Thomas snorted. White men are most dangerous when they try to do honorable things badly. Eli almost argued, then looked at Leah instead. What would you have me do? She thought of her daughter, of every person the world expected to be buried quietly because saving them was inconvenient. Live long enough to tell the truth where it still matters. That night the wind pressed dust against the doorway like dry rain, and Eli spoke of the dead because he was too weak to keep them hidden. Anna had been his wife. Their son Samuel had died in a blizzard when the doctor never made it through. Anna lasted until summer and then failed in the slow, ordinary way grief finishes what weather begins. Since then Eli had worked as if labor could drown memory. When he finished, Leah said, I had a daughter, 6 winters old. She slept with one heel outside the blanket like she meant to run, even in dreams. Fever took her. The doctor told me to come back tomorrow. After that I learned how many people the world expects us to lose politely. Eli stared at the fire. I don't know what a man says to that. Nothing, Leah said. You hear it. That is different. Near midnight, he said, almost to himself. A man who has buried enough of himself starts mistaking silence for peace. That was one of the lines Leah would remember. 5 days after he woke, riders came. Boone Kessler walked through the doorway without knocking, one hand resting easy on his pistol. 2 men waited outside. Boone looked at Eli, then smiled the thin smile of a man practiced in lying. Mr. Creed's been worried sick, he said. Town stirred up. Folks saying Indians dragged Mercer off. Best thing would be for him to come with us and clear matters proper. Leah watched Eli weigh it. Going with Boone might spare her for an hour. It would also put him back into the hands that had nearly killed him. If Silas Creed wants to speak, Eli said, he can do it in front of the county clerk and half the town. I ride nowhere private with him again. Boone's smile went flat. His gaze dropped to the packet on the table. Thomas saw it too late. Boone lunged. Thomas hit him shoulder first. A second man burst through the door, pistol half drawn. Eli snatched up the iron kettle and smashed it into the man's wrist. The shot went into the ceiling. Smoke and curses filled the room. Leah grabbed the packet and ran for the horses. By the time Boone broke free, Eli was outside trying to mount one-handed, white-faced with pain. Leah shoved him into the saddle, swung onto Thomas's spare gelding, and drove both horses into the broken red country above Cache Creek. If you were there in that moment, with armed riders behind you and a wounded man beside you, what would you have done? Would you have trusted him enough to run together, or saved yourself while there was still open country to do it in? Tell me honestly in the comments, because hard choices sound clean only to people who have never had to make one. Leah made hers and rode. The first shot clipped rock by her knee. The second threw dirt across Eli's mare. She bent low, tasted dust, and led them into a twisting wash where the banks rose red on both sides. She knew this country by the language of shadow and shale. Boone only knew speed. At the split she cut left, up a narrow seam in the stone. Her gelding scrambled and found footing. Eli's mare followed because she trusted the rider beside her when her own rider had little left to give. Boone came too fast. His horse slipped on the shale and rolled. Boone flew clear with a curse that chased them up the bluff. The other 2 kept coming. Leah pulled Eli into a stand of scrub oak and slid from the saddle. Can you hold steady for 1 shot? Maybe 2. Then wait until it matters. She moved uphill on foot, silent and moccasins where the man above her sent pebbles skittering with every step. At the rim she rose behind him, pressed her knife beneath his ear, and said, You can meet God ignorant, or you can tell the truth before I send you. His whole body locked. Creed paid us, he whispered. For what? Mercer had copies of the county books. Creed's clerk changed tax entries and water claims. Boone shot Mercer. Creed said people would rather believe Indians did it anyway. Below them a shot cracked. Eli fired. The second rider tumbled from the saddle into the wash. Leah marched her captive downslope and found Eli pale and shaking behind a boulder, one hand pressed to his side. "You waited," she said. "You told me to wait until it mattered." Then they heard clapping. Silas Creed rode out from Mesquite Shadow with 2 more men and a shotgun laid across his saddle. He was broad, silver at the temples, and dressed cleaner than the country deserved, with the easy confidence of a man too long obeyed. "I hate unfinished business," he said. "You brought extra help this time," Eli said. "I brought certainty." Creed's gaze shifted to Leah. "And here I thought Cache Creek exaggerated you." "They usually do," she said. Creed smiled. "Give me the papers. I might leave one of you alive enough to tell a kinder story." The captured rider panicked and twisted free. Leah shoved him forward just as Creed fired. The shotgun roared wide, tearing dust from the bank. Eli answered with his rifle and forced Creed back a length. Horses plunged. One of Creed's men went down under his own mount. Leah seized Eli's bridle and dragged the mare toward a narrow ravine that opened into a hidden spring pocket under stone. There Eli slid from the saddle and hit his knees. Blood worked through his shirt again. Leah tore back the bandage, checked the wound, and thanked every ancestor listening that the stitches had strained but not burst. Above them, men shouted on the wrong ridge. "You should leave me," Eli said. "Take the papers. Take the witness." "No, Leah." She tied the bandage hard enough to make him curse. "People are always asking women to lose one more thing so the world can stay comfortable. I am done making that trade." He looked at her as if the whole country had narrowed to one human face. "Why me?" "Because when Boone came through that door, you could have said I held you here. You could have saved yourself easy. You did not." His eyes burned with something deeper than pain. "I am tired of being alive in the wrong direction." Leah felt that truth land between them more softly than touch. "Then turn," she said. By dusk they reached the Holloway place. Mrs. Holloway saw the blood on both of them, heard the first 3 lines of the story, and opened her door without another question. By lantern light, the captured rider signed a confession while she sat across from him in widow's black with a shotgun over her knees. Creed moved faster than they did. Before dawn, smoke rose from Thomas's sheep camp. Leah stood in Mrs. Holloway's yard and watched the black plume climb over the bluff. The little stone room where her daughter's blanket still lay folded on a shelf was burning because she had chosen mercy over safety. Eli came to stand beside her. "He wants us grieving and scattered by noon," he said. "Let's disappoint him." Town was already boiling when they rode into Red Bluff the next day. Creed had gotten there first with his story polished smooth. Savage attack, stolen papers, confused rancher, dangerous Indian woman using witchcraft and lies. Men like Creed loved the word witchcraft whenever a woman knew something they could not control. But Red Bluff had a courthouse, a church bell, and enough people pulled into the square by rumor to make private lies harder to keep tidy. Mrs. Holloway came with the signed confession in her Bible. Thomas came with soot still on his cuffs. Eli rode straight despite the pain because a man only gets so many chances to stand where he once would have knelt. Creed waited on the courthouse steps, one boot above the crowd as if height were the same as worth. "Well," he said, smiling at Eli. "A resurrection." "No," Eli answered. "Just a man you failed to kill." The county clerk came out then, papers in hand, and no color left in his face. Burleson was a thin man who blinked too much when pressured. Leah noticed the fresh bandage around his thumb, the shine of fever in his eyes, the small tremor in his left hand. Burleson cleared his throat and announced that Eli Mercer, being injured and confused, had no standing to challenge the revised tax rolls. Mrs. Holloway's parcel and 4 others would pass at auction by sundown. Creed spread his hands. "Painful business, but orderly." "Orderly," Mrs. Holloway snapped. "You had him shot." Creed did not look at her. Grief makes women imaginative. That was when Leah stepped forward. "Mr. Burleson," she said, calm as still water. "How long since you cut that hand?" He stared. "What? How long?" 2 days. "And who dressed it?" "No one." Leah nodded. "By morning the red line will be at your shoulder. If you are fortunate, you will keep the hand. If you are not, they will bury you with the lie you are telling now." A shiver went through him. Creed barked a laugh. She's putting on a show. Leah turned to him at last. No. I am explaining what happens when rot is hidden under cloth and called a small thing. Men like you count on small corruptions. A change number in a ledger. A deputy's silence. A clerk's fear. A body left by a river. You call each piece too little to matter, and then one day the whole limb goes black. The square had gone quiet. Eli drew out the oilskin packet. Mrs. Holloway opened her Bible and produced the signed confession. Thomas shoved Boone Kessler, caught at dawn with a busted horse and nowhere left to run, up the courthouse steps by the collar. Boone saw the crowd turning and broke first. He cursed Creed, cursed the false tax rolls, cursed the riverbank where Eli should have died. Creed saw the square shift away from him and reached for his gun. Eli had expected it. So had Leah. But Eli did not draw first. The old Eli would have trusted force against force and hoped to be quicker. This one stepped aside and trusted what stood beside him. Leah snapped the end of a hitch rope around Creed's wrist and jerked hard. His shot went into the courthouse rail. Eli drove his shoulder into Creed's chest. They went down in dust and boot leather. Creed was stronger, rage-heavy, and desperate. Eli was bleeding again, but he had learned pain and patience both. He let Creed spend his fury wild, then trapped the gun arm under his knee. Leah was there an instant later, pressing Creed's own pistol to the center of his vest. Go on, he spat. You think they'll let you walk after this? Leah's face did not change. I don't need them to let me. I need them to see you. And they did. They saw Burleson crumble and admit the books had been changed. They saw Boone confirm the shooting. They saw Creed stripped bare of money's polite language. They saw Eli Mercer refuse to kill a beaten man when no one would have blamed him for it. By sunset, Silas Creed was in irons. Before the week ended, his accounts were opened, his leases suspended, his cattle notes called, and the widow parcels restored to the families he had tried to starve off them. Justice, when it finally came, did not come tidy. It came like floodwater, carrying off everything rotten that had been nailed together and called respectable. 2 mornings later, Leah rode with Thomas to the sheep camp. The roof had fallen in. Smoke smell clung to the stone. Her daughter's blanket was gone. For a while she stood in the ruin without speaking. Eli dismounted beside her holding a wrapped bundle. I cannot give back what burned, he said, but I can do better than apology if you'll let me. Inside the bundle were keys, a map, and a deed. The South Spring house, he said, and the meadow below it. Legally transferred this morning. Not a gift because I owe you. A place I am asking you to share. Keep your medicines there. Build there with me if you want to. Leah looked from the deed to him. Wind moved through the charred rafters like someone breathing in sleep. You hardly know me. I know how you stand when there is every reason to run, Eli said. I know you do not look away from pain because it is inconvenient. I know I have been lonely so long I forgot that was different from living. That is enough to begin honest. She should have answered carefully. She had built her life on careful after grief took its bite from it. Instead, she said the truest thing first. Some people are only loved in the places they bled, she said. I would like to try somewhere else. That was the line he carried like a lantern for the rest of his life. He laid a small carved horse in her palm, made from cedar root. For your shelf, he said, until the house is built. Leah closed her fingers around it. She had expected gratitude. She had not expected tenderness shaped this plain and this careful. When he kissed her, it was no grand claiming. It was the soft, astonished kiss of 2 people who had lived through enough winter to recognize spring even while standing in ash. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who we tell them for. A like and a subscribe tells us there are still people in this world who want mercy, courage, and second chances to win. The spring house went up with thick walls and broad eaves. 1 room for Eli's books and ledgers. 1 for Leah's roots, cloth rolls, cedar bundles, and the quiet knowledge her mother left in her hands. Mrs. Holloway planted beans by the fence and scolded them both into eating properly. Thomas carved a new lintel and pretended not to notice when laughter became common there. The town did not transform overnight. Places do not become just because one wicked man falls. But women came openly for Leah's medicines. Children learned the spring road and ran it without fear. And when bankmen suggested Eli should distance himself from controversy if he wanted easier credit, he told them a man once carried back to life by a woman they called inconvenient was no longer interested in easy arrangements. He meant it. In the first autumn after the house was finished, Leah found him mending a gate at dusk with the meadow grass turned gold around his boots. His side still troubled him in cold weather. She could see it in the way he favored one turn. "Come inside," she said. "You are limping." "I am moving thoughtfully," he answered. She took the hammer from his hand and set it down. "A good life is not built in one evening." "No," he said, looking at her with that quiet steadiness that had long since become home. "But a good evening counts more than people think." Years later, folks would tell the story in simpler words than it deserved. They would say a Comanche medicine woman saved a dying rancher and he loved her the rest of his days for it. That was true as far as quick truth goes. The fuller truth was better. She saved him first from death, then from the smaller grave of the man grief had made of him. He gave her not repayment, but room to remain fully herself and be cherished there. And the line Leah liked best, the one she spoke only once when both their hair had gone silver and a grandchild asked how a life survives being broken, was this: "A good heart heals crooked sometimes, but it still learns the way toward light." One summer evening, many years later, the spring house windows glowed amber while horses grazed belly deep in the meadow, and Leah and Eli sat side by side on the porch listening to water move through the dark like a promise that had finally kept itself. Next time, we'll tell the story of a deaf seamstress sent west as payment on another person's debt, and the one-armed sheriff who was the first man to ask what she wanted instead of deciding for her.